All right, we're here at the Secular Student Alliance Conference in Little Rock, Arkansas, talking to James. Hi, James.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
You're from? Oh, you're not sure how you're doing?
No, I'm doing pretty good.
All right. So you're going to school in
UNT, University of North Texas.
in Denton, Texas, right?
Denton,
Just north of
Texas.
Dallas.
Yep.
Dallas is about 3 hours. Takes about 3 hours to drive across Dallas now. So
Yeah.
you're basically on the outskirts of Dallas, for
Yep.
all practical purposes. Are you a Cowboys fan?
No.
Mavericks fan?
Nope.
They're losing the NBA championship. I've heard.
I used to be a Maverick fan, but I'm not really that big into sports. So.
Okay, all right. So,
Yeah.
all right. So, tell us what's your story. Tell me what your story is. How did you end up here?
Well, it's a long story, but I would say I grew up in a Christian household with a very Christian mother. However, my dad was always my entrance to, think bigger. I would say he's agnostic, but doesn't really claim to be. He's believes in karma. He does believe in supernatural, spiritual things, but he doesn't believe in Christianity, as well as he doesn't really understand what he believes.
So he would say that to you when you were growing up.
Yeah, he would say I believe in a lot of these things. I believe what goes around comes around. I believe there's ghosts, demons, angels maybe.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a higher being, he's always been iffy. Questionable.
Okay. Iffy on God, but not iffy on supernatural stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it comes to my mother's always believed that God existed, and the reason for it is because, everything around her life has always been almost a blessing, and has always seen as it had to have been God that did this.
Yeah.
Best example is my existence. I was a miracle child. I wasn't really supposed to be born, and my mother wasn't supposed to be alive because she had a blood disorder, a disease that basically prevented her from having kids, as well as if she had a child, she wasn't supposed to make it, or the child wasn't supposed to make it.
Yeah.
But the fact that not only does she have one kid, she has three. So she had three miracles, several blood clots on both, or all of them.
Wow.
But survived each and every one. She's still here.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Seriously. So you, she's Christian though, you said specifically, not just a theist.
Nope. She's a non-denomination.
Okay, so she goes to a Bible church or something?
She used to, not anymore. After we moved and with my dad doesn't go to church at all. So she doesn't really go that much. And she believes that she doesn't have to go to a church to, be close with God. She believes that it's a relationship.
Yeah. Does she read the Bible?
Yes, she's read the Bible. She's back to end, but she doesn't read it that much anymore. It's been years since she's read it.
Okay.
And it's even been funny enough that I actually know more about the Bible than she does.
You do, yeah.
Because even though me personally, I'm agnostic. I don't subscribe to any religion, but I'm not really an atheist because
Were you agnostic when you were 10?
No, I was always just, I guess, non-religious. I didn't really have a religion. I guess you could say I was Christian, but didn't really.
Do you think you were closer to you sort of thought more like your dad in a way?
I thought more like my dad. That is the best way to say it. Is I am always on his side where I think a lot, question everything.
Yeah.
And I used to even say I was pagan because I believe pagan they believe in the supernatural. I believe in the supernatural. I believe that there's a higher power and a supernatural effect on the world, but I don't know what it is.
You still think that way?
Yeah, I still think that way. However, I just don't. There's no real answer for it. I believe there's a higher being. I don't know who it is, or even if it's just one, maybe it's several.
Yeah.
So
for did you have a point where you were like, oh, this is the term I'm going to use to describe myself, agnostic, and how'd you learn that?
It was in high school. So after a certain period, I realized pagan isn't. It's like an old ancient religion.
Yeah.
The new one now.
Do you know what it means?
Yes.
Pagan? Do you know this word? It's a Latin word. Actually, it's from Greek originally, but paganus means a hillbilly, a hill person. Because once the Christians, became predominant, I guess the pagan practices were done up in the mountains, up in the hills. There was still the old religion of the hills or whatever.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that such stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that, but that actually makes a lot more sense because after I realized what it is, and they do a lot of herb stuff and things, I'm like,
Yeah.
And that's not me at all.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit. I'm not even gonna.
So you heard the term agnostic? Like, did you see it on YouTube or
Oh
something?
no!
or?
I met somebody who was agnostic or who explained it more because they knew more about it.
Okay.
And after I realized it, understood it, they explained that it's not that we're not atheists because. Well, at first, when he said like, we just don't believe in anything. We don't really know what anything is. I thought, okay, then you're just another word for atheist, because
Right.
non-religious is almost like another way of saying atheist. But after he says like, no, we're not atheists because atheists like 100% don't believe in anything. They believe in science only.
Yeah.
Agnostics, we just don't know. We could believe in a lot of stuff. We question a lot of stuff. And then they explained this the best way they could, and they told me several philosophers are agnostics because most philosophers always question everything. They're skeptics, and I was always a skeptic. Even when I was a kid, I always knew what that word meant.
Right.
Just didn't know what agnostic was.
It's really common in the atheist world now to have multiple categories of identity, and agnostic atheists is one of them, if you didn't know that. In fact, it's a really common one, agnostic atheist.
Yeah.
So you don't meet just a ton, I would say, of just like I don't interview a ton of just someone who's like you saying I'm agnostic in the original sense, the Huxley sense of the word, who coined the term agnostic because he wasn't an atheist, and so he said I cannot claim I know that God doesn't exist. Right. So I need a term for me. I don't believe in God, but I also can't confirm there is no God. So therefore he coined the term agnostic.
Oh.
Which means you don't know.
Yeah, and I didn't learn about that.
And that sounds like what you actually adhere to the original term.
Yeah,
so
I don't know. And that's
good.
usually how I kind of go about it. Because funnily enough, it's not even just with Christianity. That's why I know so much about Christianity, is because I've done so much research on every religion I could get my hands on.
So did you do that once you were in high school or when you started college? Or?
It was high school. Freshman year of high school, I started digging deep, and that's actually when I started my, spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Because I started with Christianity, and even to this day, I still go back and learn more, concepts and beliefs, and I don't want to say mythology, but in a sense that there's stories like that. Yeah. Kind of like in the same sense, because even in high school, I did mythology searches.
What was your process? What have you used? You're in the middle of university, right? So you've been in university a year or two, or
3 years.
3 years. So you've been going on for a while now. So what have you done in terms of the the actual process you've used? You know what I mean?
Well, I would say that I've gotten a very big understanding of a lot of different religions. I would say that I did a lot of understanding from different perspectives. Best thing to say is I learned connections between religions.
Yeah.
How almost a lot of religions are connected.
But how did you learn these things? Is what I'm saying.
Oh,
what was your
Google research?
Okay,
YouTube.
so you Google YouTube.
Research. I would go out to go talk to people of each and every religion, because I actually talked to a Satanist in high school.
Yeah.
I learned his perspective. He's basically the opposite of a Christian, but he's still in the Christian umbrella.
Yeah.
He's like, if you would say it's a tree, he's a root. He's on the other side.
Yeah.
But he does believe there's a God. He's against God, but there is a God. There's a Jesus. I talked to Jewish people. I talked to them. The only difference between Jewish people and Christians basically is they don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah.
Yeah.
They don't believe he's the Son of God.
Right.
Islamic people, I'm still struggling. I've only met maybe one, and it was still kind of hard to understand it. But I'm trying my best.
Did you read the Bible for that?
Yes, I have read the Bible. But I read different iterations.
You said you know more than your mom,
So when it comes to that, I didn't just read the Bible. I also watched several videos, like hour-longs, documentaries, explanations. Best example is this guy named, what was his name? Tall Tales or something, or Religion. He talks about mythologies, and he goes deep into that. He talked about Samael and Lucifer.
But basically, you found a YouTube channel and
I found a YouTube
somebody
channel
that seemed like they knew what they were talking about. And
I knew what he's talking about, and I'd go into even more. Go into other YouTuber videos, watching different types, Googling, because I don't know who this is, so I want to know who this is. Read the Bible. Realize the Bible is talking about somebody different in a different light.
Yeah, right.
And I learned that, there's not really a true like belief. It's kind of like perspective. You know, one thinks this, another one thinks that way. I learned about because I said I know more about the Bible than my mom is because I actually corrected her about Lucifer himself, Satan himself. I actually corrected her on the main villain of Christianity.
Right.
And I explained to her because she said like, oh, Jesus or Lucifer is still the most attractive angel in the world. And I'm like, no, he's not. I mean, that's actually in the book because he was the most attractive angel ever, and he believed because he was attractive that he was better than God, he was above God, he believed that he was equal, and he could be better. But as a punishment, he was scorned, he was scorched, he was burned, and became an ugly, disgusting thing. He's the ugliest thing in the world. He's not the most beautiful thing anymore. Because my mom was talking about that, and then I talked about the fish, Jesus fish. And I explained to her how, well, that's not really... It's a way to tell who's Jewish and who's a follower of Jesus and who isn't. It's not really it's not used properly anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's supposed to be like a secret sign, you know. The way some people put it on their cars is kind of the best proper way to do it.
Yeah.
They're saying they're Christian without saying they're Christian. If you know what it is, then you know who they are.
Do you think if you have you read one of the Gospels?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember which one, but I did read for sociology this one about I think it's called. It starts with an EU something.
EU. Well, like the Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the names of the Gospels.
Right.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
I think I read Matthew.
Oh, Matthew. Okay. So you read one of them anyway.
Yes,
So
I think I've read. I grew up with them,
Yeah.
but I grew up with them, so I don't remember.
That's different from reading them, right?
Yes, that is different
Yeah.
from reading them.
Did you find, and maybe you don't remember this very detailed, so I'm just asking more general questions,
Mm-hmm.
but did you find that when you read Matthew, say, that it was like super hard to understand it?
It is not super hard.
Okay.
to
Did you
understand
feel like when you read story after story, like Jesus healing somebody or whatever, when you read it, did you think, oh, there's probably 5 different ways you could read this?
I did kind of do that. Okay,
Did
that
you?
one I did, because I am a philosopher, and I always read this and interpret it, and as blasphemous as this may sound, because it is very blasphemous,
Yeah.
of what I'm about to say, is I also tried to, like, rationalize and realize, like, realisticize this,
Yeah.
such as turning water into wine.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays we actually do know how to do that. There's, you put things into water and it will turn into wine. It may be like really faint, like kind of gross, but it is wine.
So
Walking on
what
water.
you mean by seeing there were different interpretations is you mean you were trying to kind of figure out what was the
Yeah,
truth
that's the
behind
best
the
way.
story.
I was the interpretation. I was
do you
interpreting
think-
it differently.
Do you think that the writer thought of these things as supernatural?
Yes, I believe
Yeah,
that they
okay.
thought it was supernatural,
Yeah.
and I was trying to rationalize it.
Okay.
Because
So in terms of just trying to figure out the writer's basic point,
Yes.
Jesus say raised this guy's Jairus' daughter, from the dead.
yeah,
or
she
whatever.
raised from the dead. She could have been unconscious.
But I'm saying
Back then, they didn't really know how to differentiate.
right.
you know.
I'm saying you were looking at maybe this is sort of what actually happened historically.
Yeah.
But the writer is telling you this.
But from his perspective.
Clearly, the meaning is she was literally dead and was raised from the dead.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And that's how. And,
So that's what I
from-
meant by saying, when I was asking you, did you think you were looking, like you were reading this thinking, oh, there's 3 different ways to interpret this. I meant to interpret what the author basically meant.
Oh,
That's
no,
what I meant.
no, I did not. I interpreted that
So it
he
seemed
thought
pretty
of it-
straightforward.
It seemed straightforward.
Yeah.
Just me personally, I was always trying to rationalize.
Yeah.
Always read between the lines, basically, and like understand what could have happened and why could he
Yeah.
have interpreted this as that.
Sure. Let me ask you this then, because in one sense you've been saying here in the interview that that there's all these different ways you could interpret the Bible, and yet when you read this gospel like Matthew, you were just saying.
I was doing it for everybody.
Most of it seemed pretty straightforward.
No,
So where do you think?
well, I would
Why
say
is there this perception, or whether it's real or not, it doesn't matter, that there's like all these different ways you can interpret the Bible, and yet
So-
when you read a book of the Bible, it seemed pretty straightforward.
So that's another thing of why I would say that is because reading only Matthew's
Yeah.
is straightforward. However, you read other people's interpretations of Matthew's, they can interpret it differently. Such
Yeah.
as the best example is how people in America, and America
Yeah.
are monotheists, or not monotheists. They believe in you only can marry one wife, right?
Oh yeah.
Apparently, in other nations,
Monogamy. They
monogamy.
believe in monogamy. Yeah.
We believe in
Close.
monogamy. They believe in, apparently, best example is Africa. They believe in polygamy.
Yeah.
And they believe it's a part of the Bible that a man can marry as many wives as he wants.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that's completely contradicting of the Bible itself. And I learned that from sociology. Like, no, that's the way they read it and the way they interpret it is this way.
Yeah.
You just have an American mindset, so you're reading it in your thoughts.
Yeah.
But from them, it's like, no, well, we've always had wives. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that the Bible explains that we are allowed to marry several wives.
Yeah.
And same thing with a lot of people from the Middle East. The Middle East have several wives.
I mean, there's clearly polygamy in the Bible.
Yeah.
There's also monogamy, meaning there's people who there's men who have multiple wives.
Yeah, and some
And then
people
there's
who only have
people who
one
have one wife. Like that's clear.
Yeah.
But as far as like
how
teaching,
we teach it and how because there I did find where
in the I was going to say in the law of like in the law of Moses, anyone can read this, right?
Yeah.
It clearly, there were cases where people would have a second wife because if your husband died and you were childless, you would marry his brother.
yeah, and
that
I
was-
learned
that was-
I
yeah.
learned about that because I was so confused when I heard that in class. I had to figure out like
And then
what in the world are you
And then
talking
if you were
about?
reading the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus talks about marriage, and he's
Yeah.
really clear that he is a male and a female, and they come together and they're one flesh.
Yes,
So
one.
monogamy becomes the sort of the norm.
Yeah, and
within-
that's what it confused me so much because I read Matthew's and I understood
Yeah.
that, and then I read this and
But
I'm like,
then-
it's telling me completely different thing.
But then, okay, so let's say this. It's not really unclear what, say, Deuteronomy is saying, where it has the rules of the levirate marriage if they're in Deuteronomy, right?
Right.
And it's not really unclear that the gospel has this. So the challenge is, if it's got two different things like that, what is the person supposed to do who's a Christian, right?
Right.
What do you think a Christian would do probably in that case?
Well, at least from my mother's perspective, because as someone who's not
I'm just
Christian,
saying, yeah, okay.
the best thing that they would do is probably, it sounds bad, but I guess nitpick and choose what they want to believe and want to, what they strongly
Yeah.
morally believe, and they would go with that.
Like, what the way I would say it is like, probably if someone was Jewish, right, they're not reading the Gospel of Matthew. They don't care
No.
about the Gospel of Matthew.
No.
So they're going to probably follow more the Deuteronomy or Leviticus or whatever those rules are.
Nitpick and
if they're a
choose
Christian,
what they want to believe and choose what they don't.
Well, it's not nitpick in the sense that they just don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, so they're
Right.
going to ignore
No,
it.
that's fair.
If a Christian, they're obviously following Jesus, so they're probably going to weight what he taught in Matthew.
Right.
Even if they don't understand how it relates to the Pentateuch, the law, they're probably going to say, well, Jesus, I believe in Jesus, I follow Jesus, so
Right.
I'm going to follow his. Even if I don't understand why it's different from Moses, I'm
Right.
still going to trust that whatever the reason is, I
Yeah.
follow his authority. Like, that would seem like that's not really that complicated.
No.
That seems pretty simple to me. Because what happens for me is I hear people talk about how difficult all these different ways you can interpret. And I find when I'm actually looking at a story or looking at things, most of it isn't quite so difficult. Like, most of it seems very straightforward.
If you read it,
I'm just trying to give one example.
yeah, if you go with one example or go with one thing, it seems straightforward because
seems
you're
very
only going.
straightforward,
But
yeah.
if you go like how I did it and go with several different other iterations,
it can
of
start to feel
hearing,
very complicated.
It is
lots of
extremely
interpretations,
complicated.
yeah.
The best example is Samael, who I dropped.
Yeah.
That Samael is an angel of death.
Yeah.
He is argued probably on the level of Satan. He's
Right.
evil.
Yep.
He does God's bidding, which is contradicting, right? He does God's bidding. He does what God tells him to. He's, he.
And what part of Scripture is he from?
I could never find that.
Yeah, I don't think he's there.
I don't know where he's from.
Samael?
Samael. Samael.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with this term, so I don't think this is a Bible term unless I'm just missing something.
I'd never heard of him before
Okay.
either. I
So
literally found him.
I was
and
just
then-
talking about just the biblical texts themselves, right? That's all
Right.
I'm talking about. And for the Christian, the common sense probably approach, they're mostly going to do. I'm just saying, like someone like your mom or whoever.
Yeah, no, I understand
is
that
probably just going
completely.
to say, well, most of what Jesus is saying seems pretty straightforward, so they're probably just going to follow that as the priority,
Right, and
even
that's-
if they don't understand some
the
other
complexities of it.
book.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand
Okay.
that. But and I get that, and that's why I'm completely fine with Christians.
Yeah.
However, I always want to go for the bigger picture. I like to ask big questions. I like to figure out complicated reasonings.
Yeah.
I like to understand why people think this, why people believe this, what could justify this. What are, find the bigger picture, and then,
I'm like you.
I'm a philosopher.
I'm like you in the sense that I was never very satisfied.
Nope.
When I was an atheist through high school, middle school and high school and stuff, and I became a Christian in college.
Right.
But I was always like, I want the big picture.
Right.
And I want to know something's true. I don't want to pretend something's true,
Right. And that's why I always kept going against Christianity, but also why I've also gone toward Buddhism and led
Does Buddhism have supernatural stuff like...
Yes. It does have, it believes in karma. It believes that, reincarnation. It does believe in supernaturals because a lot of people in my family have stated that they remember things that they shouldn't have. Like my grandmother remembered dying in the Holocaust from a dog, from a German Shepherd.
Yeah.
And she was a little girl, and she remembers these things vividly, and says that's why she's afraid of dogs to this day. She's terrified of dogs, is because of that memory that she.
So she has like a personal intuitive experience that seemed
Catholic.
like evidence for.
For her unrational fear, because she's never had a bad experience
Was she a Christian?
with a dog.
Your grandma?
She's a Catholic.
Catholic. Okay.
She's Catholic, and to this day she's terrified of dogs.
And no background in reincarnation.
No background,
right?
nothing.
Yeah,
She's never gotten attacked by a dog. No dogs ever barked at her, bit her. Nothing. She's just terrified of dogs because of an experience that she in her life never even had. It's just something that she feels and remembers for some reason.
Yeah.
And when it comes to even though Buddhism, my dad used to say he was Buddhist, but he started doing more research. I was like, he doesn't feel like it fits him either. And I'm in the same boat. It doesn't really fit me. But my dad still says he's Buddhist. I don't.
Okay.
I used to say that I was Hindu, but nope.
Hindu?
Yep.
Even though you were raised Catholic?
Yep, I was raised Christian and Catholic. Okay. My mom's side is Christian.
Okay. And there was no Hinduism in your family background? No, you just for a time thought...
Yeah, I did some research and I liked what they were talking about, the reincarnation, karma, the path, the way to it.
Some versions of Hinduism, have monotheism as a part of them. Did you know that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The Buddha himself is, you could say that he is like the God.
For Buddhism, you mean?
Buddha. For Hinduism.
Are you talking about Hinduism or are you talking?
I'm talking about Buddha. Buddhism has I would say Buddha
I thought you were talking about Hinduism for us.
Hinduism has like several gods. Yeah. You could say that one of them could be the king of gods.
Some strands of Hinduism are monotheistic is all I was saying.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought you said Buddhism.
A lot of people don't know that. I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah.
For Hinduism, not Buddhism.
Wait, how so? They have several gods.
Yeah, it'd be a whole other, it'd be like a class. Do you want to have a class on Hinduism? From a non-expert on Hinduism?
Fair enough. I had a class in Buddhism.
I would just say, go look it up.
No,
it doesn't take that long to find it.
Fair enough. The reason why is because I did have a class in Buddhism, Shintoism, and Taoism. I actually used to love being I almost transitioned to be a Taoist because I loved the concept of everything is balanced for a reason.
Yeah.
And things that get unbalanced, you can see the balancing of it in the later on.
Yeah.
Like something chaotic happens, and then later on the lines, something orderly happens because of that chaos. I'm like, that's so strange, but that's kind of fascinating.
Tell me about when you said higher power, the way I understand you then is you just meant more generically powers that are
out of my control.
Out of our control, and that are not reducible to science, I guess?
Not reducible to science, yeah.
Or scientific inquiry is the right way to say
Right,
that.
and I do believe that there is a higher power, even a higher being.
And why, what makes you think that's the case?
I just feel like a lot of my life has been completely random and unreasonably lucky. I throw that term a lot when it comes to me, and even my friends who have witnessed it through hand, just say that's pure luck. That makes no sense of how that worked for you.
Right.
Because I would go out and do things. Unreasonable, unjust, unorthodoxly. I would just go out, even to this day. The reason why I'm here is because boredom. Yeah. I was bored. I got an email.
Boredom accounts for most of human
behaviors. I was bored. I had an opportunity. They said that they'll help me out to go here. I'm like, okay.
I'm here.
And now I'm here. And
so by luck you mean things go well.
Things not even go well.
Okay.
Because when it comes to luck, it's not just good luck or bad luck. I just say luck because it can go either way. Because sometimes I do things and something horrible can happen. Like I got a ticket coming from here.
Yeah.
And after, because I'm already like, I'm so in debt right now.
So it's like almost like a payment for something you did wrong.
Yeah, payment for something I did wrong, but I get something out of it as well because technically this is a free trip to Arkansas that I've never been.
So do you think of that as but it's impersonal? Or do you think it's possible that these things that happen in your life have a personal origin, the higher power is more personal than impersonal?
No, I always think that it's impersonal. Like, it's not even like, it could happen to anybody.
More like a law of the universe.
It's a law of the universe. Causality is what I've always gone and said. Is like, I believe in causality. Things happen out of nowhere, out of the blue.
Do you think
randomly.
the universe itself was intended?
I don't even know. I'm a philosopher.
It doesn't seem like it created itself.
Nope.
So
I would say that it just happened out of nowhere, randomly. And it could have.
That creates lots of philosophical problems, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the problem with philosophy. It's
the idea
paradox.
that there was nothing and then there was something.
Yep, it's paradoxical.
Big problem. Yeah. Because we don't. I don't need to say this to you because we don't. Things don't normally just come from nothing. It's hard to. How could they?
So it's like, I had a whole conversation with your friend over there about how something has to have a beginning. Everything has to have a beginning. And I threw out this one about God.
Yeah.
Like, well, everything has a beginning, but except for God, because God has always been around and never had a beginning. Then, what's God's beginning? Because everything has a beginning.
Yeah. I don't even really, just for clarity, for me personally, I don't even mean like everything has to have a beginning. I don't even really mean that.
Right.
Because I teach classics, right? So I teach the Greeks and Romans and their ways of thinking and their philosophies and stuff. The idea that there would be nothing and something now exists was untenable generally for their world, like for their philosophical framework, because it doesn't make sense that there would be absolutely nothing and then now there's something. So they rejected that idea.
Right.
Okay. So it's hard to get past that for me, not because of my Christian worldview, just because I was introduced to some philosophy, and I'm like, it is kind of hard to think. That doesn't even seem like that would make sense. It's a paradox that doesn't seem like there's no way to get around that. It seems like there's no way to get around it, but maybe I'm wrong. And
it's always when it comes to the Christian, or even I always just say Abrahamic God, is that like the fact that he's always been around. I always found that as a paradox. I'm like, well, he created the universe, and now to this day we can confirm and say that the universe will end eventually. Long, far, it's gonna there's gonna be nothing.
It certainly
left.
won't exist as in its current form forever. It will change at some point. It'll expand.
Even our sun.
At some point, all the atoms are far, far away from each other.
Far, far away, and they just start dying out slowly. But it's it's gonna be a long process. But basically, in point, the universe has an end, just like it had a beginning.
Do you think, in terms of meaning, do you think it seems like the fact that the idea that there's some framework to reality with a higher power for you that's appealing because it adds meaning or something, or no?
Nah. When it comes to meaning, I've always just interpreted that meaning as like a scale, or not even a scale. It's like a leveling system. Some things have meaning, and some things have less meaning than others.
Okay.
I had a whole class about this as well. We talked about it where basically that chair right over there could have a meaning. Yeah. What is that meaning? Oh, someone sits there. Who it is doesn't matter. Could be the president. Could be some random hobo. Right. It could be meaningful, but nothing really is meaningless. Nothing has no meaning. Something always has a meaning. It just, it varies.
Yeah. Okay. For you, there's an impersonal law of the universe called a higher power. It's a force, but it's not gravity or the weak atomic force or something like that. You're not talking about the fundamental forces.
No, it's more something like chaotic, or chaos theory or something.
Okay, it's transcendent, I guess?
Yeah, transcendent is the best way to say it.
It's transcendent. But
something unreachable.
Okay. So would be a question I have then, that do you think if it's unreachable, it's not worth thinking much more about if you've concluded it's unreachable? Or
I think it's because it's so unreachable. I think it's even more reason to try and reach out for it.
yeah.
Even though the possibilities of you.
Wait, you
Ever-
understand that doesn't sound like it makes sense, right? It's
No,
unreachable.
it's unreachable, but it's
But
something
you
to
still reach
strive
out.
towards.
Okay.
Because I mean, I'm wearing a berserk hat, which the whole point of
Towards would mean there's progress that could be made. So it's not unreachable. It's not completely unreachable.
it's
It's
not-
interesting how close
it's
your
plausible.
ideas of this are to God. The idea, because God obviously is not fully reachable, right?
Right.
To a human being
right.
who's finite and God's infinite. But it's so it's similar.
It's
Do you
something
think
to
that
want
your-
to obtain.
Do you think
And I
that
think
your
it's-
idea of a higher power really is just kind of like God minus the personal stuff?
I guess it's not even God, because me personally, I believe that there's probably more gods than just one. It's a giant, vast.
So you think there's actual
large
gods?
Maybe. I just don't know who they are or what it is or what belief.
But they would be part of the higher power, like
Yep.
the layer of higher power.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like there might be some force controlling the giant, vast universe. It's
Yeah.
We're a giant speck in a giant sea of sand.
Yeah.
So it would make no
So
sense.
in some ways, the Greeks were closer to
Yeah.
the truth.
The
in
Greeks,
that way?
that's why I actually,
Yeah.
I used to
But
call myself
not-
pagan, because pagans had several
Yeah.
gods.
But not like Plato and Aristotle. They went astray because they believed in only one God.
Wait, they did?
Yeah.
Plato?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
The ultimate good, capital G, for Plato, right, is
Oh.
is a unity, is one.
Oh,
So-
I did not interpret it that. I
Yeah.
didn't talk, that's
I don't
Plato's
mean
Republic?
he believes in God in the same way Abraham did. You understand?
Oh,
I just
okay.
mean that was not a polytheist.
You believe that
They
there
were
was
very
one.
critical of the idea that there were multiple gods. That's
Okay.
That's a really common theme within many classical philosophers, especially people like Aristotle, Plato, Xenophanes, people like that.
Huh.
So I was just curious if you may not have known that, but I was
I did
just
not know
saying
that.
if you didn't know that, it would mean your view is, at least I think, if I understand this, it sounds a little closer to the sort of Olympian view, you know.
I
But
guess.
maybe not with all the stories, though. Is that right?
Not with the stories,
You don't think
because it's
they're
not,
actually living on Olympus and
No.
visiting the battlefields of Earth?
No. The best way to say it, and this is going to sound strange because I did get this from Muslim beliefs, is that it's like where their God, Allah, isn't really paying attention to us. And I'm not saying that we need to go, make noise to where we can get their attention. I don't
Okay.
believe that we have to.
Yeah.
I think it's more like there's a God. I heard this quote. I don't know where I got it from, but it's like, oh, God's a child, or our God is a child looking at a sandbox, at an ant farm.
Yeah.
Watching the world do what it wants, but it's still there, Sometimes having a little bit of an effect here and there, but nothing's personal. Like
How
the
did-
kid's not having a personal attachment to an ant, a personal
Yeah.
one. No, it's just affecting the large scale of it.
Does it seem paradoxical that we are personal, but the bottom layer of reality is impersonal? Like, how would we I don't even really mean how we would become personal, but does that seem like, I've always thought, just for me, that the fact that we're personal, it seems obvious that something that's personal is like higher than things that are impersonal. Just seems that, it intuitively seems that way.
Right.
So it seems sort of weird to me that the universe, like the highest power or the highest force, would be impersonal. And
I
I'm
guess-
saying that purely by intuition, not by any
No
kind of
worries.
argument or anything.
No worries. I think it might even be like, I would say, it's not that it's impersonal, it's that it's just more personal towards itself rather than us.
Ah, okay.
Kind of like how we're,
Disinterested, yeah.
it's disinterested.
But
But it's like how we're personal.
Yeah.
We're very personal, but we don't look at like the birds outside or the squirrels or the
Okay.
ants. Or like we don't pay attention to everything that's around us. Kind of like how
There's a hierarchy
yeah,
of
it's
what's
a
more
hierarchy
important.
of what's more important. And sure,
What would be the most
we're-
important thing to this being? Itself?
Yes, itself.
These beings?
These beings, like,
Yep.
and that's kind of what I would say if there was one or several gods.
That makes sense to me, by the way, if there's a personalness
Right.
to the highest being,
it would be itself. It wouldn't really be.
its highest personal interest would be its own person. Like,
Yeah.
that seems obvious.
Or at least if it's several, then it would probably be him
Yeah.
and everybody who was like him.
in your view, does the universe sort of come then in some way? I don't want to say creation per se, but in some way is the universe like emanating out of this personal layer of gods?
What do you mean?
Well, you were saying there's this immaterial reality. It's gods, plural. It's clearly higher, more powerful than us, outside of our control. It's personal. And I'm saying, did we all, our universe, come from this immaterial? Our universe is a material universe, right? Did it come out of this immaterial world, or were they dualistically living forever? Because our universe seems to have had a beginning. So I'm just curious.
Now that is an excellent question, and that is something I'm to this day still struggling with.
Not sure. Okay.
I'm not sure because I've always had this question with the idea of our own God, or even the gods of the Hindus and Buddhism and Psyche and all of this, or I guess it's called Psyche.
Psyche,
Psyche.
So the reason I asked that is because I thought if your view was, and it may not be this, but I thought if your view was that our universe, including us, have somehow, not necessarily like Genesis, you understand, but just somehow come out of this immaterial higher power layer of gods, okay, who are personal. If we've somehow come out of them, we're the result of that, then it would mean that, or would it mean that the fact that we're personal, but this table isn't, means that we mean more to these gods than the table does?
Right.
It would seem like it would.
Yeah.
Because we were made personal more like them, or that.
Right.
Whatever that higher power is.
Yeah, I think it could be like that, where we, to them, have some meaning, but it's not like in a grand scale of, I guess to them it would be like a planet and as a whole.
Yeah.
We individually have more meaning than maybe this table or like the ground, but to the planet or the moon, the stars, it's probably not as meaningful because those are bigger, more important, more grand. So those obviously take more priority, more meaning.
Yeah. Because then it might mean some of the karma you were talking about is like personally coming from the gods. It's not just random, but it's
the universe.
Intended.
It's the universe has, and that's kind of what I've always believed that.
Capital U, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, the universe itself is affecting, everything like.
But it would mean the universe is at bottom personal. There's a philosopher named Josh Rasmussen who's at Baylor. Really interesting philosopher, by the way. If you ever watch an interview of him on YouTube, really interesting to listen to. But his view is that the universe at bottom. Okay, let me flip this. The common view for a lot of atheists or naturalists is that the universe is natural,
right,
and material, and that consciousness kind of emanates or emerges out of the material world, right? Like our brain, out of it emerges the mind, which is immaterial.
Right.
His view is the reverse. It's the upside down view.
Oh.
Or as he says, I guess he would have to say it's the right side up view. That consciousness is the bottom layer, and the material world has come out of that. So in a sense, I guess the fact that we're personal would make sense, that we come out of this personal thing, assuming consciousness is personal. Anyway, he's well worth listening to.
It sounds
very
interesting. It sounds very interesting.
And he does long form interviews, conversations with atheists as well as the Christians. I think his background is Christian, but he has very interesting dialogue with a lot of intellectual atheists in the philosophical world and so on. So he's well worth listening to and interesting to follow.
I might check him out.
Yeah, Josh Rasmussen as his name.
It sounded, I would say, the way it sounded, how you were interpreting it, it kind of reminded me a lot of Wolf and Kahn's argument. Where Wolf and Kahn had, I learned this in my existential class, existentialism, and Wolf basically was arguing that some things have no meaning while others do, like eating dirt is meaningless. But however, Kahn, which is who I kind of subscribe more towards, is everything has meaning, and eating dirt probably had a purpose. What was the purpose? Who knows? Maybe that person eating dirt got a disease, and that disease affected others and killed somebody.
All right, let me ask you one final question, just so we can wrap it up, because I have a feeling you and I could talk for a couple of hours.
No worries.
What do you think about the idea, like in the Gospels, right? You read Matthew. The idea is Jesus came into the world,
Yes.
as the Son of God.
The Son of God, a baby.
And died for everybody, right? So you know all this.
Yep.
It seems to me like that seems like it's pretty nice.
It does sound nice.
It sounds like if God, the Creator, cared enough to come in and die, that would seem like that's really nice. Do you think, like, was that your impression when you were reading Matthew, or were you like, nah, I don't know what I think about that?
The best thing I would say when it comes to Jesus himself, entirely, because I still love and respect Jesus, but I love and respect Jesus on the sense that he is a great and amazing philosopher. In the sense of Buddha, Confucius, as well as, what was it? There's another one. Buddha, Confucius, and Lao Tzu. Those are all amazing philosophers. They have great like ideals.
Yeah.
And, and Jesus himself had an amazing like belief.
Yeah.
He had an amazing idea of peace, love, care, community, building together and working together. He had an amazing, beautiful message. And that's why when it comes to Christians, even though I am not Christian, I don't hate Christians and I don't go against Jesus himself. I don't. I love his message. I love his reasoning. He's got an amazing, be a better person is what he's basically arguing and, making you want to be. He's telling you, be a better person. Help out your neighbors. Don't be, like the Roman Empire, military only and force people to, follow your orders and subdue them. If he's a son of God, who's to say? But one thing is true, like, he was at least a great thinker. He was an amazing thinker, and
Do you think if someone, I mean, this is an old kind of argument, so I'm just kind of curious what you think of this off the top. C.S. Lewis said this, if you want to know the origin of it, but if someone walked around today and they seemed like they were a really good moral teacher, but then they also said they were God, would you think you would take them seriously, or?
I would say I would hear them out, but I would also be very skeptical about the I am God part.
Yeah. Unless they were raising people from the dead.
Unless they're raising people from this, then I would at least be questionable.
That'd
Like,
be
you
different.
definitely have at least some form of supernatural ability.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not a direct descendant of God, but you definitely do have some form of touch of something.
Okay. I mean, I figured that's what you would say, your answer. I think it's a pretty honest answer. I was just curious.
No worries.
Hey,
But,
this has been a great conversation. Seriously, really enjoyed it, and hope you have a good conference.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm happy to do this. I love doing these conversations because I do them a lot at UNT. It's best to have it more openly.
Awesome. Great. Thanks a lot.
Well, nice to meet you.
All right.
Take care.
All right.